Turkey has witnessed an unprecedented wave of mass protests with hundreds of thousands of citizens taking to the streets in Istanbul and other major cities. These demonstrations are not just spontaneous acts of defiance. They reflect deep-seated frustrations over political repression, economic hardships, and a perceived erosion of democratic institutions. This movement signifies a broader societal demand for change, with many citizens hoping to see an end to the long-standing rule of President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan and his party AKP. A major catalyst for these protests was the recent arrest of Istanbul Mayor Ekrem Imamoglu, a key opposition figure. Imamoglu, a member of CHP, had gained widespread popularity after defeating the AKP candidate in the 2019 Istanbul mayoral elections. His victory was seen as a significant political setback for Erdogan, who once served as Istanbul's mayor and considers the city his stronghold. On March 19th, Imamoglu was detained on corruption charges, which many observers believe were politically motivated. His arrest came just days before he was expected to be nominated as the CHP's presidential candidate for the 2028 elections, leading many to see this as an attempt by the government to eliminate a strong challenger. Critics argue that the judiciary, increasingly seen as an extension of the executive branch, has been weaponized against political opponents. The response to the arrest was immediate and intense. Millions of citizens across Turkey poured into the streets, demanding his release and calling for democratic reforms. A major rally in Istanbul, organized by the CHP, gathered over 2 million participants, marking one of the largest political demonstrations in Turkey's recent history. Protesters carried banners reading "Justice for him" and chanted slogans against Erdogan's rule, highlighting a growing dissatisfaction with the country's leadership. The judiciary, once considered an independent body, has increasingly been accused of acting in favor of the ruling party. Journalists, academics, and activists who speak out against the government frequently face arrests, trials, and imprisonment under vague terrorism-related charges. One of the most striking examples of this crackdown on dissent is the widespread suppression of media freedom. State-controlled and pro-government media outlets have largely ignored the protests, while independent journalists attempting to cover them have been detained or harassed. Social media, which has become the primary platform for opposition voices, has also faced restrictions with internet slowdowns and censorship, preventing the free flow of information. Many Turks fear that the country is sliding toward authoritarianism, with elections increasingly seen as neither free nor fair. The opposition has accused the government of manipulating electoral laws to weaken its chances in future elections. Erdogan's decision to remove elected officials and replace them with government appointees in key municipalities, including those won by the opposition, has further fueled the perception that democracy in Turkey is under siege. Beyond political repression, economic grievances have played a crucial role in mobilizing public discontent. Turkey has been facing one of its worst economic crises in decades, with inflation soaring above 70% in recent months. The Turkish lira has lost significant value against major currencies, leading to skyrocketing prices for essential goods and services. Many working-class citizens have seen their purchasing power eroded, and unemployment rates remain high, particularly among the youth. Discontent is especially pronounced among young people, many of whom feel that they have no economic future under the current government. University graduates struggle to find stable jobs, and those who do often earn wages that fail to keep pace with inflation. Public sector corruption and mismanagement have only exacerbated these economic woes. Reports of lavish government spending, questionable contracts awarded to pro-government business elites, and financial scandals have further angered citizens. Many believe that the country's wealth is being concentrated in the hands of a few, while ordinary people struggle to make ends meet. A notable aspect of the recent demonstrations is the active participation of young people. Many members of Turkey's younger generation feel alienated from the current political system and are demanding greater political representation, economic opportunities, and personal freedoms. Unlike older generations who may have experienced economic prosperity during the early years of Erdogan's rule, younger Turks have grown up in an era marked by economic instability and growing authoritarianism. This generational divide is evident in the protests, where students and young professionals make up a significant portion of demonstrators. Social media has played a crucial role in organizing and mobilizing young protesters. Despite government attempts to restrict access, platforms like Twitter and TikTok have been used to spread information, coordinate demonstrations, and amplify dissenting voices. Protesters have developed creative strategies to bypass government censorship, such as using encrypted messaging apps and live streaming protests from anonymous accounts. The recent rapprochement between the AKP and the PKK also played an effective role in this process. The AKP's second normalization process with the PKK led to an increase in nationalist reactions in the country. At the same time, while anti-AKP protests continued throughout the country, the PKK and its supporters held PKK celebrations in different provinces and waved the Kurdistan flag. The Kurdish party and organizations close to the PKK that decided not to participate in anti-AKP protests provide important clues about new-era Turkish politics. In response to the growing unrest, the CHP has intensified its calls for early elections, arguing that the government has lost its legitimacy. Opposition leaders have warned that unless democratic processes are restored, Turkey risks further instability and unrest. CHP leadership has called on other opposition parties to unite in a broad coalition to challenge Erdogan's rule. The idea of forming a new political alliance similar to the Nation Alliance that contested the 2023 elections is gaining traction. The opposition hopes that by presenting a united front, they can galvanize public support and force the government to call for a snap election. However, the government has dismissed these calls, with Erdogan accusing the opposition of attempting to destabilize the country. The president has remained defiant, vowing to take legal action against demonstrators and warning of harsher crackdowns if protests continue. Security forces have already detained nearly 2,000 protesters, and there are growing concerns that a further escalation of violence may occur. The Turkish government's response to the protests has drawn international attention, though global reactions have been mixed. While some Western governments have condemned the crackdown on dissent and called for the release of political prisoners, others have remained largely silent, wary of jeopardizing diplomatic and economic ties with Ankara. Erdogan has used nationalist rhetoric to dismiss foreign criticism, accusing Western powers of interfering in Turkey's internal affairs. This has resonated with some segments of his base, who view international criticism as part of a broader conspiracy against Turkey. Meanwhile, human rights organizations have urged Turkey to uphold democratic principles and respect the right to peaceful protest. Amnesty International have called for an end to arbitrary arrests and for the protection of freedom of expression. The ongoing protests in Turkey highlight a society at a crossroads. The combination of political repression, economic turmoil, and growing generational discontent has created a perfect storm for mass mobilization. The arrest of Ekrem Imamoglu has served as a catalyst, but the grievances driving the protests extend far beyond one individual. Whether these demonstrations will lead to meaningful political change remains uncertain. The government's hardline response suggests that it is unwilling to make concessions, raising concerns about further crackdowns and potential unrest. At the same time, the scale and intensity of these protests indicate that many Turks are no longer willing to accept the status quo. As Turkey moves forward, the outcome of this struggle will shape the country's political future for years to come. The demand for democracy, economic stability, and justice remains at the heart of the protests, and whether or not these demands are met will determine the direction of the nation.